Hello students, today we have some really good articles from The Hindu and Indian Express. And as part of our daily news analysis, we'll cover each of that article in detail and will ensure that from the exam perspective, every dimension is covered. Now before we start with this daily news analysis, a piece of motivation for all of you. You must tell yourself, no matter how hard it is or how hard it gets, I am going to make it. So every day you might come up with new challenges. You might face different kind of challenges wherein you might feel that I can't do this. I can't make it in this examination. But every day you have to say to yourself, you have to give yourself this motivation or self-affirmation wherein you say, I'm going to make it at any cost. Okay. So with this motivational piece, let's move ahead. Before that, a piece of notification. Narayana Ice Academy has brought in 1 year and 2 year courses, and you can register with each of this, any of this course, and you'll be provided with this QR code through which you can register. The details of this course are mentioned over here. For example, general studies and CSAT lectures of around 800 plus hours, 200 hours of current affairs lectures specifically provided to you. Then there will be a micro schedule which will be followed by the faculty specifically to deal with each and every aspect of your syllabus. And there will be testing mechanism wherein you will be solving many prelims and mains related tests. So you can register and go ahead with these courses. Now moving ahead with our daily news analysis. So I've chosen 5 most important articles. The first article is related to death penalty provision. So whether we should allow death sentence to be given in India or whether we should completely ban it. This is the question that we are going to discuss. Recently, a case in West Bengal which was in controversy because of which many protests took place, and that case has brought this issue of death penalty in news. So we'll understand that in detail. The second article is related to IMEC corridor. India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Now this IMEC corridor is in news since the time of G20 summit which took place in India. But now we are discussing it as Donald Trump has come into power, and we are talking about India-US relations to go ahead. And there IMEC can be a major project where both countries can focus. So this is an important article. Third one is related to capital expenditure. We all know that government of India is spending substantial amount of money on building capital. Specifically, they are focusing more on building infrastructure. So this aspect we'll understand here. Then the fourth article is related to distinguished jurist. Now in India, in judiciary, we observe that many a times there is vacancy. Because of vacancy, we say that the judges are not in a position to take up all the cases and there is pendency of cases. So one of the solution which is given is to bring in distinguished jurists. So we'll understand this. And at last, the final article is about Donald Trump, who has become president, and on his very first day, he has signed many executive orders. We'll understand all those orders. Okay, so let's start with the first article specifically with respect to death sentence or death penalty, or we call it as capital punishment. Now this article is important for prelims as well as mains, specifically GS paper 2 as well as I will say GS paper 4. It is important. Now look at this previous year question asked in the year 2014. Instances of president's delay in commuting death sentences has come under public debate as denial of justice. Should there be a time specified for the president to accept or reject such petitions? Analyze. Now to answer this question, you should have a comprehensive understanding of death sentence. Okay. Now let's understand the context of the news. Why we are actually reading about it. So there is a medical college in West Bengal, Kolkata, RG Kar Medical College and Hospital. In this hospital, an incident took place wherein a lady doctor was raped and murdered. After that incident, widespread protests took place throughout India, specifically in the state of West Bengal. After which, the demand of capital punishment or death penalty came into picture. So many people started arguing that such a person should be given death penalty. In simple terms, we call it capital punishment. Simple as in legal terms. Now, this is where the role of CBI came into picture. CBI took this case, they started working on it, they investigated, and in the court of law, they said that in this case, we assume this case as one of the rarest of the rare case, and that's why death penalty should be given in this case. But what has happened recently is the Kolkata Session Court has not given death penalty. Rather, they have given life imprisonment to this guy called Sanjay Roy. Now, many are still criticizing that this is not a good judgment. We should have given death penalty. Even the Chief Minister of West Bengal, she is also saying that death penalty should be given. So that's the reason we are studying about death penalty or the term capital punishment. When we use this term capital punishment, it simply means that we are going to kill a person. We means the state. State is going to kill someone or execute someone, but legally. It is not an illegal act. The person has done something very much wrong, and that's why we are killing or executing that person. So it is a kind of punishment. See, state gives different kinds of punishments. We put you in jail or do some put you some kind of fine on you. We call capital punishment as one of the extreme form of punishment or the most severe form of punishment. There is no punishment which can be more extreme than this capital punishment. Okay? And see, it's not like we will be giving you this punishment in simpler cases. For example, you have stolen something. In that case, you will not be provided with capital punishment. But certainly, if the crime that you have done is a very severe crime, for example, you have murdered someone, you are a terrorist, you have done treason, in such cases, this capital punishment is given. Now, is it the present time when we are thinking about capital punishment, or it is taking place since a long time? Well, the answer is it is there since a very, very long time. If we go back to 18th century BC, at that time, if you can remember this Mesopotamia, ancient civilization. So in this Mesopotamia, there is a city called Babylon. So in that city, when that first criminal code was developed, that we call as Hammurabi Code, in that code, capital punishment provisions were already there. So we can say since ancient time, the provision of death penalty exists. Now, after that in Greece, Rome, there also we saw such provision existed. For example, for treason, murder, etc. And what was the method to kill people? See, right now how we execute people, we simply hang them. But in the ancient time, methods were different. For example, people used to be crucified. So your hands will be nailed to a cross and people will wait for you to die. Then people will be drowned in water or they were burnt alive. Such harsh measures were taken to execute that person, to give capital punishment. If you come to the medieval time period, so if we specifically look at Britain, in Britain, instead of all these crucifixion, drowning, burning alive, Britain started a new mechanism, that is of hanging people. They thought that this is a better way. And after some time, the same thing was introduced in India as Britain ruled over India. So we can say in India this practice has come up because of Britain's rule, hanging. Now look at this thing in the modern time phase. This we talked about ancient time, this we talked about medieval time. But later on in the modern time phase, we see many movements throughout the world which specifically argued about human rights, which said that we should not have such a heinous punishment wherein you are directly killing people. State has no right to kill people, rather right to life is a fundamental human right. So we see some abolitionist movement led by people like Cesar Beccaria in 18th century. And such movements continued for a long duration. And we saw that throughout the world, many countries started abolishing or cancelling out this practice of giving death sentence to people. So right now, you see, by 2023, this data says total 112 countries have already abolished this practice of death sentence in their country. Now, is India part of it? The answer is no. India has this provision of death sentence. But what we do is we give it only in the rarest of the rare case. That means we don't use it in normal cases. Only in the rarest case we will give you death sentence. So first let's understand what is the argument which supports this idea, what is the argument which is completely against it. Okay, there are many people who support that there should be death sentence, there should be capital punishment. One of the argument is of retributive justice. Now, if you have read about it, retributive justice simply says that if you have done something wrong to me, I will do something wrong to you. And this is the right idea of justice. So, an eye for an eye principle is applicable over here. So, if someone has killed the other person, in that case, that person should also be killed. That is the real justice, is what retributive justice will say. Another argument given by people is deterrence. See, if you're doing a heinous crime and if you will get a very small punishment, let's say we are putting you in jail or if we are putting some kind of fine on you, do you think people will be afraid of law? They will again go ahead and do that crime. So to bring in deterrence, the people, the criminals should have some kind of fear in their mind whenever they go ahead with such extreme crime. So to build that deterrence, we should have capital punishment. When you hang some people, then there will be some kind of fear that you will not kill, you will not go for heinous crime. Then next is prevention of recidivism. Now what is recidivism? Well, simply there are some criminals who after serving the punishment, they will still go ahead with the same crime again. So what we call them, they are habitual offenders. So for such people, if you do not have the provision of capital punishment, they will keep on doing the same thing. They'll keep on murdering people. So we can prevent that recidivism through capital punishment. Then when you are looking at the criminal justice system, when you look at the idea of justice, you have to think from the perspective of the family members of the victim. So let's say a person is raped and killed. Can you think about the pain the family of that person is going through? And for them, the idea of justice simply means the idea of retributive justice. So that's why if you want that the family should also get some kind of justice, you have to go ahead with it. And at last, what about taxpayers? Now, how come we are talking about taxpayers? See, if you do not give capital punishment or death sentence to someone, you're going to put that person in jail for lifetime. Who will pay for him? So we are going to pay for him. The taxpayers are going to pay the infrastructure required for the prisons and all. So overall, many people argue that why should we pay for a criminal? Best way would be just execute him. Now these are the arguments which support this idea. But there are many people who argue completely against it. They say we should completely abolish death sentence. Why? Well, it is morally incorrect. It is ethically incorrect. See, what you're doing is you are killing people. The state is killing people. When we look at state, we assume that state is a very ideal thing. State is an ethical institution. So we don't expect an ethical institution to kill others. That's why it is an immoral act to take life of someone by legal means. Now, second argument is there is a risk wherein you might make some mistake. The criminal justice system, the court, the investigating agencies, everyone can make some kind of errors or mistakes. And let's say because of your mistake, you have given death sentence to a person who is innocent. Now, usually when you make mistake, you try to make it correct, you try to correct it. But is it possible in this case? Once you have executed that person, you cannot go back. So considering this risk, it is better to give him life imprisonment rather than directly executing. The next argument is about deterrence. You said that if we do not have any kind of deterrence, these people or these criminals will keep on doing this act. Well, those countries who have implemented or who have this penalty or provision of capital punishment in their legal system, do we see that people are not murdering someone? It's not happening. We don't see any specific empirical evidence which argues or which gives us some kind of data wherein they prove that if you bring in capital punishment, there will be lesser crime in that country. We don't have any such data. That simply means it doesn't act as deterrence at all. And then many people also argue that such provisions are usually misused against some people. In your society, those who are marginalized, those who are at a disadvantaged position, usually such provisions are used against them. Now, there is a very famous case from Andhra Pradesh wherein a lady was raped, after which there was immense pressure on the police or the investigating agencies to bring in those people and give them some kind of punishment. But what we saw after that was the event wherein police simply had gone ahead with killing them, killing as part of encounter. Now such incidents might also take place. So the point is, if in case the things are not going in a way wherein what we wanted or what was the main objective of the law is not served, then what's the use of that law? Apart from that, there is an idea of reformation, or what we call it as reformative justice. Earlier we talked about retributive justice. Now we are talking about reformative justice. See, why do we have prisons? Why do we have courts? The first idea would be to give punishment to someone. But the other side of the argument would be to reform people, to make them like others, to make them like a society or civilized people. So let's say I'm doing some kinds of crimes, so I'll be put in jail. But after serving that penalty, what I'll be expected is I will be reformed. I will become a new person, a civilized person who can live in society. So usually we expect these systems to provide an option for us to reform, to change. But in case of death penalty, there is no such thing. You are not given any last chance to reform, rather you are directly executed. And the last argument is, what about the psychological and societal impact? When the state itself is executing or killing or going for violence, in that case, the entire society is getting desensitized towards violence. If state can do violence, then people will also do the violence. So simply, if you want your society to become morally upright and sensitive towards these violent acts, in that case, you have to stop any kind of violence, even by the state. This is the argument against capital punishment. Now, the last part comes from the international treaties and obligations. So, if you read Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there's article number 3. That article says every human being has right to life, and that right to life cannot be taken away from that person. So, as India has already signed this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have this obligation. Then, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Now, if you read this, there are some provisions in it which say that we don't want to have any kind of death penalty in the world. So although India has not signed that optional protocol which is related to this ICCPR, but still these international treaties show how the world is moving ahead, how the progressive modern world is moving ahead. Okay, now the constitutional and legal frameworks specifically with respect to India. If you read Article 21, it talks about right to life, but it mentions that there is an exception wherein your life can be taken, this right to life can be taken by state by the procedure established by law. So even when someone is hanged or killed, that is done in a constitutional and by legal means. So we have some laws. For example, if you read the IPC section 121, if you are waging war against the state, if you are murdering someone, abetting mutiny, if you are giving any false evidence due to which an innocent person is executed, or if you have raped a minor person, then under this POXO Act, all these are the sections through which you can be provided with capital punishment in India. But there are some cases. For example, this Bachchan Singh case in 1980. In this case, Supreme Court set a new idea. That idea is of rarest of the rare case, wherein court said that will not give this death penalty in every case. Our constitution and our laws allow death penalty, but we will give it only in the rarest of the rare case. And after that, in the year 1983, this Machi Singh versus State of Punjab. In this case, court has given specific categories which will be studied, and after that, death penalty will be given. So they'll check the nature of that crime, what kind of impact this crime will have on the society. Let's say the case of Nirbhaya, if you remember. In that case, there is some impact on society. It is said that the collective conscience of the society is completely disturbed because of such heinous crime in the Nirbhaya case. So, in such a way, society's impact, victim status, what was the intensity of that crime, and inadequacy of the punishment. Let's say there are so many punishments given in the law, but no punishment can actually ensure that pure justice is given. In that case only, you will go ahead with this capital punishment, and we call this as the rarest of the rare case. Okay, so you can understand the thought process of Supreme Court here. But there are some challenges in implementing capital punishment. For example, how are you going to define it? Now it completely depends on the judge. So the nature of rarest of the rare doctrine depends on judges. Every judge might come up with its own interpretation. So it is very subjective. Second, because of subjectivity, you will see some inconsistency. So one judge will give death sentence in a particular case, another judge might not give it. The cases were very much similar, still they will not give it because there is no standard protocol, there is no standards provided which can give you a correct idea on which case this rarest of the rare doctrine should be applied. Then inadequate consideration to mitigating factors. Now see, sometimes the person who is getting into that criminal activity, we have to check his background also. For example, what is his mental health? What is his age? What is the potential for reform? So let's say if we talk about this factor of age, there's a person who is not even 18 plus, let's say of 10-year age, and he or she has done such a heinous crime. Can we give him or her the same punishment which we are giving to adults? Now, this is something we are going to question. So, such are the mitigating factors, and I think we should give it a consideration at least while giving the judgment. And at last, delays in the mercy petitions. So, once this death sentence is given, after that, if someone is filing mercy petition, sometimes there are delays in it. So, let's say today someone is going to be executed. That person has filed mercy petition, but that is getting delayed because of which he or she will be executed today. So there are implementational challenges over here. Now look at the view of Law Commission with respect to capital punishment. Earlier Law Commission had this view that we should not abolish this practice. In India, we should have capital punishment. Under this 35th report, they said this. But later on, under 262nd report, they said we should abolish capital punishment We should have it only in the rare case wherein there is act of terrorism or there is someone who is waging war against the state of India. Only in these two cases we should provide capital punishment. Otherwise, we should completely abolish it, because the modern world is moving towards the idea where human rights are protected. So overall, in conclusion, we can also say that if we want to make India a more just and more human society, we can also abolish such a practice, rather give people life imprisonment, and only in case of the rarest of the rare doctrine, just as we are taking it, or in the very extreme cases, we can go ahead with such practices. Okay, so this was the article on capital punishment. I hope it is clear. Now let's move ahead with the second article, which is related to IMEC corridor. Now this is important from international relations perspective. In prelims also, there can be a factual question related to this particular topic. Look at this previous year question and please read this question once. Please read the entire question. So this question is related to China-Pakistan economic corridor, and they are talking about One Belt One Road initiative, or right now we call it as Belt and Road Initiative, BR. So even when we are talking about IMEC, it is also related to this BRI project. It has some relation with this. Okay. So the name of this corridor is India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor. The idea of this corridor came into picture when G20 summit was taking place in New Delhi in the year 2023. At that time, a new idea came into picture that we can connect India with the Middle East and Middle East with the Europe and build a corridor. Now, when you say corridor, we are talking about a transportational route. See, you must have heard about Mumbai Delhi corridor. Let's say we are talking about Mumbai and Delhi corridor. So what we are doing is we are connecting Delhi with Mumbai. When we are saying we are connecting, we are building transportational facilities. So there will be road, there will be railway, there will be facilities which will allow transportation. The transportation will become easier. So if you want to send any good from one place to another, any service you want to send, all that becomes very much possible in this corridor. So overall, when you bring in such a corridor, the trade aspect is the core aspect. You want that these two cities to be connected and the economic growth should go ahead. But here we are not talking about cities. Here we are talking about entire regions. So we are saying we will connect India with the Middle East and that too with the Europe. So right now the plan is to define this corridor in two different parts. One part is Eastern Corridor, other part is the Northern Corridor. So let's look at the map. This is the eastern part of this corridor. So first we are going to connect India with UAE. Then UAE will be connected to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia will then be connected to Jordan, and Jordan will be connected to Israel. So this is the part of Middle East, and this is the eastern part of this entire corridor. Now what about the northern corridor? Well, this Israel country will be having connections with the European countries like Greece. So anyhow, you are trying to connect with the Middle East and then Europe. So just look at this entire region. This entire region will get integrated in economic terms. Okay. So this is the plan right now. Now this corridor, apart from rail and road, it also includes electricity cables, it also includes hydrogen pipelines, it also includes high speed data cables. And it is being said that once it is developed, your transportation cost and transportation time will be reduced very substantially. So it is being said that transportation time will be reduced by 40%, and cost will be reduced by 30%. So you can say that it is a very good initiative. It is a very good initiative. Now some factual part which you can study is reading about the ports which are part of this IMEC corridor. So ports from India, for example, in Gujarat we have Mundra Port, Kandla Port, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, Navi Mumbai. Similarly, there are ports from Middle East, then there is port from Israel and then Europe. So this is a factual part which you can read. One core thing which I want to suggest or which I want to discuss is about the geopolitical significance of this IMEC corridor. So you all must have heard about Belt and Road Initiative of China. China wants to build an entire project wherein they are also building different corridors, wherein the plan is to connect China or connect the entire Asia with that of Europe and other parts of the world. And through these corridors, China wants to dominate over the entire globe. Now, to counter the Chinese hegemony, this new project of IMEC is being thought. So, wherein we are looking at a mechanism which wants to bring in multipolarity. So, instead of China dominating in this economic integration, we will have a mechanism wherein we have different players in it. So India is a good player. There are players from Middle East. There are players from Europe. So different players will be part of it, and even USA can play a key role in this because USA's assistance or help will be very crucial. For example, Middle East and Israel, their relations are not at a good position right now. So USA will have to play a key role to ensure that these relations are built again. Okay, so this is all about this IMEC corridor. Clear? Now, the next article. This one is related to capital expenditure. So we just have to have some kind of idea, basic idea about capital expenditure and revenue expenditure. Most importantly, this can be asked in pre as well as mains, so you should have a brief idea. You can read this previous year question asked in the year 2022. So acquiring new technology is a capital expenditure. Debt financing is considered capital expenditure. Equity financing is considered revenue expenditure. So such statements are given and you will be expected to answer it. So we'll try to understand the idea of capital expenditure in the simplest form as much as possible. So you see, when COVID-19 pandemic happened, at that time we saw that our economic growth could not continue. Rather, we had to stop our economic activities with those lockdowns. And after that, government knew that this is not a good thing for economy. And now, if we want to recover, we have to put in some amount of money in our economy. So government started spending money. When government spends money, that spending is of two types. One type is called as revenue expenditure and another one is called as capital expenditure. Now understand it in simple way. If government is giving salary to some people, we call it revenue expenditure. Why we are calling it revenue expenditure? Well, by paying salary, government is not generating any asset. But instead of that, if government goes for something else, let's say government is putting some money and building a road, they have constructed a road, they have constructed metro, or they have built any kind of infrastructure. Here we say that government has created an asset. This asset is going to give some kind of benefit in future. Once you paid salary, it is not going to give you back anything. But once you put money on building these roads, because of building a road, there will be new economic activities generated. Some people will start moving from one location to another. Some traders will move on. Some business activities will start. So overall, it will create asset for the government. So we are saying capital expenditure is the one wherein we are creating some assets, or if not creating assets, we are at least reducing our liabilities. But in case of revenue expenditure, we are not creating any asset as such, and we are not reducing any liability as such. Now there is one term called effective capital expenditure. Here we say that government is creating long-term assets, or government is also giving some grants to the state government. So many a times we heard the central government giving grants to state governments. So that is also part of it. Now you can see a trend since the financial year 2018 to the financial year 2024. You can see this trend wherein you can observe that capital expenditure, which is also called as capex in short, this capital expenditure is continuously increasing. You should have this idea about trend. Now, it is being said that government is certainly spending. This capital expenditure from government side is going on. But from the private sector, we don't see much investment coming into picture. So to help with this, to revive this private sector investment, some recommendations are being given. For example, we need to build a conducive environment for investment. So whatever kind of reform you need to bring in, you have to go ahead with that so that new investments will come to India. Then we need to boost demand. Right now the demand is relatively low. And why the demand is low? Because people do not have enough money. So if government can ensure that the disposable income or the income that is there with public, that is increased, then these people are going to spend it. So there will be some kind of demand. That demand can be generated. And one more thing government needs to understand, that if they keep on going ahead with this capital expenditure, that means government will have to spend money. Now this is a costly affair for government, and government may run out of the funds, and that's why government will have to balance this capital expenditure with the fiscal consolidation. That means they have to ensure that their budget is not strained. They have to maintain that thing. The when we talk about the deficit that is taking place in terms of budget, that should not increase beyond a certain limit. So these are the recommendations that are being given right now. Now, the last article, sorry, the fourth article, last one is related to Donald Trump. So the fourth article is related to distinguished jurist. Now this is important for your GS paper 2, wherein we talk about appointment of various constitutional posts, including the judges of Supreme Court and High Court. Now look at this previous year question which is asked and which is related to judicial review, and many a times you will see questions in prelims related to judiciary. So you should be ready with any such article, you should be ready with your content. Now, what's the case? Now in India, we say that there are many backlogs and judicial vacancies. Now backlogs, when we say, we are talking about the cases, judicial cases which are pending in the court of law. Right now if you see, if you study the Supreme Court, High Court and the other subordinate courts, and if you see the number of cases which are still pending, the number is somewhere around 4 to 5 crore. These many cases are pending. Now if you ask judges, they will say that there are many judicial posts which are vacant, because of which we have very few judges, and only these judges will have to take care of all these cases. So these pending cases are increasing. Okay, so vacancy is there. Now one of the solution to deal with this vacancy would be to bring in some distinguished jurists. Now who are distinguished jurists? Now these are people who are experts in the constitutional or legal systems. So let's say some academicians who have been studying about law in detail. Let's say they are professors in a big university. They have done PhD or whatever. They are experts, they have subject knowledge, they have subject expertise, and that's why we are calling them distinguished jurists. So what we can do is, we have vacancies, we can bring in distinguished jurists, and already we have such provision in our constitution which allows us to bring in distinguished jurists and make them judges in Supreme Court or High Court. This is how we can deal with this pending cases, all these backlogs. Now I already talked about the backlog. Here we have another data related to high courts also. In high courts, the sanction strength is 1122, but right now only 371, sorry, 371 are vacant. So you can understand vacancies are there. And pending cases, overall I said 5 crores. If you look at just high courts, it is more than 60 lakh cases which are pending. You can utilize all such data in your answers directly. Now I said our constitution allows bringing distinguished jurists. So which are those provisions? Well, we have article 124 3c. So in Supreme Court, you can appoint a distinguished jurist under this provision. And we have article 217 clause 2 clause c. It allows such appointment in the High Court. But interestingly, this provision related to High Court was repealed later on by government or the parliament, we can say. Now, interestingly, if you look at the global practice, we see there are many countries where distinguished jurists are brought in the judiciary. For example, if you go to USA, Spain, Italy, Thailand, Kenya, these are the countries which have already allowed or constitutionally allowed distinguished jurists to become part of the judiciary, and they feel that it's a very good practice that you are bringing in academicians who are experts of legal systems or legal understanding. So this is how we are trying to understand that globally it is taking place, and we have some problems which can be solved using these distinguished jurists. But there are some challenges or concerns if we want to bring it. First is, these people are academicians. They have studied laws, they have studied constitutions, they have knowledge, but they do not have the practical experience of courtrooms. If you look at other judges, they earlier had been part of the court, they know how the court system works, how things have been going on, they have that experience. These people lack that courtroom experience. Second challenge is, the people who are already part of judiciary, they don't like this idea that you are bringing in these jurists and making them judges. And this is very much similar to what we see even in case of bureaucracy also. When we talk about lateral entry, the bureaucrats who are there in the system, they resist this idea. Similarly, the judges over here, they also resist this idea. Then third is the training part. So they don't have the courtroom experience, so they will require some kind of training to be given. But to give them training, there must be some infrastructure. So all these are the challenges at present. Even if you want to bring in distinguished jurists, you will have to solve all these challenges. You will have to bring in some solution for that. Now, one of the solutions would be the mechanism that you already have to appoint judges using that collegium system, which we already discussed in one of our DNA. So do it promptly, do it on timely basis. As soon as collegium has given any recommendation, government should appoint them. That's one of the way. Or reintroduce that constitutional provision which was repealed earlier. That can be reintroduced. We can give training about all those procedures and all to these people, and we can bring in some collaboration between academics and this judiciary. Right now we do not have this collaboration, and we can bring in by bringing in this distinguished jurist and making them part of judiciary. Okay, so that was your fourth article. Now the last and the fifth article of the day, related to Donald Trump. Now, very interesting article, first page of your Indian Express, talks about golden age of America begins now. For us, it is more important to know what's happening. Although there won't be any direct question as such from this article, but you should know what is exactly happening in the world. So, on the first day of becoming President of United States of America, Donald Trump has signed multiple executive orders, and all these are very much controversial. For example, he said that USA will not be part of World Health Organization. So where USA is going to withdraw from World Health Organization. Then they are going to withdraw from Paris Climate Accord. Earlier also, when Donald Trump became president, he did the same thing. He withdrew from Paris deal. But later on, USA said that later on, as party changed after the election, the reversal took place. Now, this is the second time Trump has again given an order to withdraw from this Paris climate deal. Then they have ended this Green New Deal, which is also related to climate change. Now, this Green New Deal was brought in at the time of Roosevelt. So, government of USA was supposed to take actions to deal with climate change, and here they are going against that idea by ending that deal. They have brought in national emergency at southern borders. So here, when we talk about southern borders, we are talking about Mexico. So in the campaigns, the Donald Trump many a times said that there are many illegal immigrants coming from Mexico. So there, he is going to protect the border of America, and that's why this emergency has come into picture. Then in the election campaigns, he also talked about bringing in new tariffs or new taxes for other countries, for example, for China, Mexico, many countries. And for that, this external revenue service is being set up for going to collect these tariffs or taxes. And very controversial decision of Donald Trump is to recognize only two genders, that there is only male and female, there is no other gender. This is what the executive order is saying. Then they have also renamed Gulf of Mexico as Gulf of America. And the name of this Mount McKinley has been restored. And lastly, the executive order also talks about Panama Canal issue. They're saying that this Panama Canal, USA is going to take back. The control of Panama will be taken back even if a military attack is required, USA will do it. So this intent has been announced very clearly in these orders. So you should have a brief idea about USA, what's exactly happening right now, what are the policies of Donald Trump. Briefly, you should have understanding of it. Okay. Now the time has come for practice questions. We'll start with the mains practice question. I suggest you to please read this question and try to think about the body part which you can answer. Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds to just think about it. Done? So do you think capital punishment aligns with the principles of justice and human rights in modern India? Discuss. So simply, although the question is one liner, but the question expects you to answer whether we should have this capital punishment or not. So the arguments in support of it, arguments against it, and the final conclusion, all this matters. And when you are giving any argument, it will be expected from you that you substantiate your argument. Okay, so here you can simply introduce the idea of capital punishment. You can give the context also, or you can talk about this rarest of rare doctrine given under this Bachchan Singh case, under which we provide capital punishment. So anything can be written in introduction. The major part which includes your body part will be the arguments. So arguments supporting it, arguments against it. So to support, you'll talk about retributive justice, deterrence, prevention of recidivism, families, victims' families, their case is also important, and the legal safeguards we have in India. Right? We can talk about that Bachchan Singh case again. Then arguments against it. All these arguments we have already discussed from international human rights perspective, discriminatory application, there is no evidence of deterrence as such, wrongful execution, ethical angle, everything. Then specifically talk about the judicial aspect, the cases that are there, all these cases, and what the law commission thinks about it. Then also talk about what's happening around the world. So global trend. And when you're talking about global trend, you have to talk about this idea that we are in the phase of modernity, and India is also progressing. India is trying to become a progressive society, a modern society. We were a traditional society, but now we are also becoming modern. So consider all these trends and then give your evaluation, your understanding, or your conclusion, because finally the relevance for modern India is being discussed. So in modern India, do we really want to have such a practice, or do we really want to abolish this practice? So you have to give your own conclusion, your own perspective. So it's up to you. One of the way would be to give a balanced approach, wherein you say that absolutely abolishing would not be a practical way, but to have rarest of the rare doctrine is a good way. Or even there would be some people who will simply take the view that we should not have this. Okay, that's a pacifistic perspective, which is also fine. Now, some prelims practice questions from the articles we discussed yesterday. Which ministry is responsible for implementing Swamitva scheme in India? Well, very easy question. Ministry of Panchayati Raj is the answer. Okay. Second, with reference to International Labour Organization, consider the following statements. ILO was established in 1946 as a specialized agency of United Nations. Absolutely wrong. ILO came way prior, and United Nations came in 1946. So, wrong statement. India, a founding member of ILO, has ratified all the 8 core conventions of the organization. This is also factually incorrect. We only signed 6 and not the 8 core conventions. The ILO operates on a tripartite principle involving equal representation of government, employers, and workers. That is absolutely true. We have this mechanism of tripartite principle. Fourth, headquarter of ILO is located in New York, United States. Again wrong. It's in Geneva, Switzerland. So fourth is wrong. So only third statement is right. So the answer would be B, 3 only. The term Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, in short RCEP, often appears in the news in the context of the affairs of a group of countries known as. Very simple question. It's related to ASEAN. Okay. Now, the questions from today's articles. Now, this is a homework for you. We'll discuss the answers of these questions tomorrow. But if you want to attempt them, simply go to your comment box or the description box. There you will find a link which will redirect you to the website wherein you can directly answer these questions. Okay, so first question related to IMEC. It links Indian ports to Europe via UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. IMEC project was announced during the BRICS summit in New Delhi. France, Germany, and Italy are among the European partners in the IMEC initiative. So, very easy question, I would say. The second, Article 124(3)(c) of Indian Constitution permits the appointment of which category of individuals as judges of Supreme Court? Again, very easy question. We have discussed the article in detail. And the last related to capital expenditure, effective capital expenditure. As a percentage of GDP currently stands around 8% of GDP, and effective capital expenditures has consistently increased in the past 5 years. Now this is a moderate or a difficult level question. This also you can attempt. So these are your articles for today. We'll meet in the next session. Thank you so much for joining.